My stepfather built a multi-million-dollar tech empire using my dead father's ideas. While refusing to adopt me, I spent 3 years secretly sabotaging his company from the inside until he lost everything. When I was 8 years old, my father died in a motorcycle accident. He was a brilliant software engineer who had been working on some revolutionary cybersecurity protocols in his spare time. Nothing was patented yet, just notebooks full of code and concepts that were way ahead of their time. Mom remarried when I was 10 to this guy Marcus, who also worked in tech. At first, Marcus seemed okay. He was decent to me, helped with homework, came to a few school events. My little brother Tyler was 6 when Marcus came into our lives, and my sister Chloe was 4. They barely remembered our real dad, but I remembered everything. The late nights he spent coding, the excitement in his voice when he'd explain his projects to me, the plans he had for starting his own security company someday. Marcus officially adopted Tyler and Chloe when I was 12, changed their last names to his, the whole deal. When I asked Mom why I wasn't included in the adoption, she gave me some bullshit about how I was old enough to decide for myself, and that Marcus wanted to respect my connection to my biological father. The truth came out years later. Marcus didn't want to adopt me because I reminded him too much of my dad. I looked exactly like him, had his same intense focus on computers, asked too many questions about the coding projects Marcus had suddenly started working on after marrying Mom. See, Marcus had found my dad's notebooks. Mom had shown them to him, thinking he might want to help preserve dad's work as some kind of memorial. Instead, Marcus saw $signs. Those cybersecurity protocols my dad had been developing, Marcus quietly turned them into the foundation of his new company. By the time I was 16, Marcus had built a multi-million-dollar cybersecurity firm called Secure Core Solutions. He was the brilliant CEO who had revolutionized enterprise security. Tech magazines were calling him a visionary. He moved us into a mansion, bought luxury cars, started traveling to conferences around the world. My siblings worshipped him. Tyler wanted to follow in his footsteps and study business. Chloe was the apple of his eye, the daughter he'd always wanted. At family dinners, Marcus would talk about grooming Tyler to eventually take over the company, about setting up trust funds for his children's futures. His children, not me, never me. I was the outsider in my own family, the kid who still had his dead father's last name while everyone else was a real member of the family. Marcus made sure I understood the difference in subtle ways. Tyler and Chloe got the latest phones, laptops, gaming systems. I got hand-me-downs and birthday gifts that were clearly afterthoughts. When Tyler struggled with math, Marcus hired expensive tutors. When I showed natural talent for programming and asked about computer science camps, Marcus said they were too expensive and I should look into scholarships. Meanwhile, Chloe was taking horseback riding lessons that cost more than most people's rent. The worst part was watching Marcus take credit for ideas that I recognized from my dad's old notebooks. During his big keynote speeches about innovation in cybersecurity, he'd described concepts that my father had explained to me years earlier. He'd written books, given TED Talks, built an entire reputation on my dead father's work. Nobody knew except me. Mom either didn't remember the details of Dad's projects or chose not to see the similarities. Tyler and Chloe had been too young to understand what Dad was working on. I was the only one who knew Marcus was a fraud. I tried telling Mom once when I was 17, showed her some of Dad's old notebooks and pointed out how Marcus's revolutionary ideas matched what Dad had written years earlier. She got angry at me for trying to diminish Marcus's achievements and said I was being disrespectful to the man who'd raised me and provided for our family. That's when I realized I was completely alone in this. My own mother had chosen to believe the lie rather than protect my father's legacy. Senior year, Marcus made a big show of offering to pay for college for Tyler and Chloe, setting up education funds that would cover everything. When I asked about my college plans, Marcus said he'd help me look into student loans and scholarships. After all, he wasn't technically my father, so he couldn't be expected to provide the same level of support. I got into a decent state school for computer science, took out massive student loans while watching my siblings get everything handed to them, worked part-time jobs to pay for textbooks while Tyler bought $1,000 gaming rigs with his allowance. But here's what Marcus didn't know. I had been secretly copying my father's notebooks for years. Every page, every diagram, every line of code. I'd scan them when Marcus wasn't home and keep digital copies hidden on encrypted drives. I also started reaching out to my father's old colleagues through LinkedIn and professional forums. That's how I met Dr. Sarah Chen, who had worked with my father at his previous company. She remembered him fondly and was shocked to learn he'd died. When I mentioned Marcus and Secure Core, her expression changed completely. "Wait," she said during our video call. "Marcus Riley is your stepfather? The one who's been claiming credit for the Morrison protocols?" "The what protocols?" "Your father's cybersecurity framework. We used to call them the Morrison protocols after his last name. Everyone in the field knew Daniel Morrison was working on revolutionary security concepts before he died. But then this Marcus Riley appeared claiming he'd developed similar ideas independently. This was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. Dr. Chen agreed to help me document the timeline of my father's work and Marcus's subsequent innovations. She also introduced me to other engineers who remembered my dad and were suspicious about Marcus's sudden rise in the industry. College was actually a relief. Finally got away from the constant reminder that that I didn't belong in Marcus's version of our family. Threw myself into studying, made friends who didn't know about my complicated family situation, started to build my own identity. I was good at coding, really good. Professors noticed, started recommending me for internships and research projects. By junior year, I was already getting job offers from major tech companies. Turns out I'd inherited more than just my father's looks. I had his talent too. During my sophomore year, something interesting happened. Marcus started struggling with SecureCore's next generation of products. The industry was evolving faster than he could keep up, and he was clearly out of his depth when it came to the more advanced concepts my father had only sketched out in his later notebooks. SecureCore's stock price started declining. Competitors were releasing more sophisticated products, and Marcus's innovations suddenly looked dated. I watched from my dorm room as tech blogs started questioning whether Marcus Riley was still the visionary leader the industry thought he was. That's when I started planning my revenge. Senior year, I got an offer from CyberGuard Industries, one of SecureCore's biggest competitors. The salary was incredible, the work was exactly what I wanted to do, and most importantly, it would put me in direct competition with Marcus's company. I accepted the job and didn't tell my family about it. As far as they knew, I was working for some small startup they'd never heard of. Let them keep thinking I was the family failure while I learned everything I could about the industry. CyberGuard's CEO, Patricia Wong, was a legend in cybersecurity. During my first week, she called me into her office. "I've been following your academic work," she said. "Your approach to security protocols is remarkably innovative, almost like you're building on some foundational concepts that are ahead of the current market." I almost laughed. Of course it seemed innovative. I was building on my father's work that Marcus had stolen but never fully understood. "I've been studying cybersecurity for a long time," I told her. "My father was a software engineer who worked on some interesting projects before he died." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "I'd love to hear more about that sometime. In the meantime, I have a special project for you. We're developing a new security framework to compete with SecureCore's enterprise solutions. I think you'd be perfect for the team." This was better than I could have hoped for. I was going to help destroy Marcus's company using the very concepts he'd stolen from my father. But I wasn't content with just competing. I wanted to systematically dismantle everything Marcus had built on my father's stolen work. So I started gathering intelligence. I reached out to former SecureCore employees through professional networks. Many were frustrated with Marcus's leadership and willing to share insights about the company's internal problems. I learned about rushed product releases, corner cutting in security implementations, and growing client dissatisfaction. I also discovered that Marcus had been lying about his background. His resume claimed he'd developed cybersecurity expertise at previous companies, but I found former colleagues who said he'd been mediocre at best before his sudden breakthrough innovations after marrying my mother. Most damning of all, I found evidence that Marcus had been selling flawed security solutions to major corporations. He'd implemented my father's concepts incorrectly, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hackers. Companies were paying millions for SecureCore's revolutionary security, not knowing they were actually less safe than before. This gave me an idea for the perfect revenge. I wouldn't just compete with SecureCore, I would expose their security flaws publicly, destroy their reputation, and reveal Marcus as the fraud he'd always been. The next 2 years were the most focused I'd ever been. I worked 60-hour weeks, learning every detail about SecureCore's products and finding their weaknesses. The beautiful thing was that Marcus had never fully understood my father's work. He'd implemented the surface concepts, but missed the deeper innovations that could have made his products truly revolutionary. I, on the other hand, had grown up understanding my father's vision. I knew where Marcus's implementations were flawed, where they could be improved, and most importantly, how to build something better. During this time, I also started documenting everything for the eventual legal battle I knew was coming. Dr. Chen helped me establish a timeline, proving my father had developed these concepts years before Marcus claimed to have invented them. We gathered testimonies from other engineers who remembered my father's work, found email trails and project documentation that supported our case. I even hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Marcus's background. Turned out he'd been fired from his job right before marrying my mother for attempting to steal proprietary code from his employer. The pattern of theft went back much further than I'd realized. Meanwhile, at family gatherings, Marcus continued treating me like the disappointing stepson who'd never amount to anything. At Tyler's high school graduation, Marcus made a speech about how proud he was of his real children's accomplishments, while barely acknowledging my academic achievements. "Some kids are just natural leaders," Marcus said, toasting Tyler. "They understand how to build something meaningful with their lives." The implication was clear. Tyler was destined for greatness while I was destined for mediocrity. If only Marcus knew I was systematically preparing to destroy everything he'd built. CyberGuard's new security platform was a masterpiece. We called it ShieldNet, and it was everything my father's original vision could have been if someone who actually understood the work had developed it. Faster, more secure, more user-friendly, and about half the cost of SecureCore's enterprise solutions. But ShieldNet was just part 1 of my plan. Part 2 involved exposing SecureCore's security vulnerabilities in the most public way possible. I discovered that SecureCore's flagship product had a critical flaw in its encryption protocol, a flaw that existed because Marcus had misunderstood a key component of my father's original design. This vulnerability could allow hackers to access supposedly secure corporate networks. Working with Dr. Chen and a team of ethical hackers, I developed a proof-of-concept exploit that demonstrated exactly how SecureCore's security could be breached. Then, I documented everything in a comprehensive white paper that proved not only that the vulnerability existed, but that it was the result of incorrectly implementing my father's original security concepts. Patricia promoted me to senior developer and gave me equity in the company. At 24, I was making more money than Marcus had been paying himself in SecureCore's early days. But this wasn't about money, it was about justice. The tech industry started buzzing about ShieldNet months before we officially launched. Early reviews were incredible. Major companies were already expressing interest in switching from SecureCore. Marcus's revolutionary cybersecurity solutions suddenly looked outdated and overpriced. But Marcus still didn't know what was coming. As far as he knew, I was just his unsuccessful stepson working at some unknown company. He had no idea I was behind his biggest competitive threat. That changed when Wired magazine published my white paper about cybersecurity vulnerabilities in enterprise software. The article was titled "The Morrison Legacy: How Stolen Innovation Led to Systemic Security Flaws." The paper didn't just expose SecureCore's vulnerabilities, it told the whole story. How my father, Daniel Morrison, had developed revolutionary cybersecurity concepts before his death. How those concepts had been appropriated by someone who didn't fully understand them. How incorrect implementation had created security risks affecting millions of users. I included copies of my father's original notebooks, testimonies from his former colleagues, and a detailed technical analysis showing how SecureCore's products contained flawed versions of my father's innovations. The response was immediate and devastating. Within hours, SecureCore's stock price dropped 40%. Major clients started demanding security audits. Tech blogs were calling it the biggest cybersecurity scandal in years. Marcus called me that night, absolutely furious. "What the hell have you done?" he screamed into the phone. "I've honored my father's legacy," I said calmly. "Something you never bothered to do. You're destroying our family's livelihood, Tyler's future, Chloe's education. Everything depends on SecureCore." "No, Marcus. Everything depends on stolen work that you've been taking credit for since I was 12. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. You can't prove anything. Those notebooks could be fake. Those testimonies could be bought." "Could be, but they're not, and you know it. The question is, how long do you think you can maintain the lie when everyone in the industry is looking for evidence?" The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Marcus knew he was finished. The next few weeks were chaos. Federal investigators opened an inquiry into intellectual property theft. SecureCore's board of directors called for Marcus's resignation. Major clients canceled contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Tyler called me, panicking about his future with SecureCore. Chloe was worried about her college tuition. Mom begged me to fix this because the family was facing financial ruin. "You created this mess," I told Mom. "You chose to believe Marcus's lies instead of protecting Dad's legacy. Now you get to live with the consequences." But the most satisfying moment came when Marcus showed up at my apartment, looking haggard and desperate. "Please," he said, "I'll admit everything. I'll give you credit for your father's work. Just help me save the company." "Why would I want to save a company built on theft?" "Because Tyler and Chloe's futures depend on it. They're innocent in all this." I looked at this man who'd spent years making me feel worthless while getting rich off my father's stolen work. Tyler and Chloe benefited from that theft for their entire lives. They got education funds, luxury cars, private schools, all paid for with money that should have gone to honoring my father's memory. Their innocence ended the moment they accepted those benefits. "What do you want?" Marcus asked, completely defeated. "I want SecureCore to fail. I want your reputation destroyed. I want everyone to know that you're a fraud who built an empire on a dead man's work. And I want my father's name on every innovation you stole from him." That's when the family dinner invitations started coming. I'd been keeping my distance from family events for the past 2 years, always had some excuse. Work deadlines, friends visiting, prior commitments. The truth was, I couldn't stand watching Marcus play the successful patriarch while knowing he'd built everything on my father's stolen work. But when Tyler graduated from business school, Mom insisted I come to the celebration dinner, said the family needed to stick together, that Marcus had some big announcements to make about Tyler's future with SecureCore. By this point, SecureCore was hemorrhaging money and clients, but Marcus was still trying to maintain the facade that everything was fine. I decided to attend the dinner, curious to see how he'd try to spin the company's collapse. The dinner was at some expensive steakhouse Marcus loved, the kind of place where he could show off by ordering the most expensive wine on the menu. Tyler looked proud in his new suit. Chloe was home from her junior year at an Ivy League school that Marcus was struggling to pay for, and Mom was desperately trying to maintain the appearance that everything was normal. Marcus stood up during dessert to make his announcement. Tyler was officially joining SecureCore as Vice President of Business Development. There was a signing bonus, stock options, a clear path to eventually taking over the company. The whole family applauded while Tyler looked like he'd won the lottery. "And of course," Marcus added, looking at me with that condescending smile I'd grown to hate, "we're always proud of all our children's achievements achievements, no matter what level they reach. The implication was clear. Tyler was joining the family empire while I was still just the stepkid working at some nobody company. That's when I decided it was time. Actually, Marcus, I have some news too, I said, pulling out my phone. I just got promoted again. Senior developer at CyberGuard Industries. Maybe you've heard of us? The smile froze on Marcus's face. CyberGuard was SecureCore's biggest threat, and everyone in the industry knew it. That's interesting, he said carefully. I didn't know you were working in cybersecurity. Oh yes, I've been there for over 2 years now, working on some really exciting projects. In fact, we just launched something that's getting a lot of attention in the industry. I pulled up the TechCrunch article on my phone and slid it across the table. The headline read, CyberGuard's ShieldNet platform set to revolutionize enterprise security. Marcus read the article, and I watched the color drain from his face as he recognized concepts that were clearly inspired by the same foundational work his company was built on, but implemented far better. How? He whispered. How what, Marcus? Where did these ideas come from? I smiled and pulled out something I'd been carrying for 2 years, waiting for this moment. My father's original notebook, the one I'd kept hidden in my room all these years. From my dad, the real innovator in cybersecurity. The man whose work you've been taking credit for since I was 12 years old. The entire table went silent. Mom looked confused. Tyler and Chloe were staring between Marcus and me, and Marcus looked like he was about to have a heart attack. That's impossible, Mom said. Marcus developed those ideas himself. He's been working in cybersecurity since he married you and got access to Dad's research, I interrupted. Every major breakthrough SecureCore has made, every innovation Marcus has taken credit for, it's all based on work my father did before he died. I opened the notebook and started reading directly from my father's notes, concepts that were identical to SecureCore's core technologies. Then I showed them printouts of Marcus's patents and papers, demonstrating how he'd taken my father's work and claimed it as his own. You stole from a dead man, I said, looking directly at Marcus. Built your entire reputation on his ideas, got rich and famous off his work while refusing to even adopt his son. Marcus tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The dates, the concepts, the implementations, everything matched too perfectly to be coincidence. And now, I continued, I've spent the last 2 years using my father's complete vision to build something that's going to destroy your company. ShieldNet isn't just better than SecureCore. It's what SecureCore should have been if you'd actually understood the work you stole. But that's not all, I said, pulling out my phone again. Because while I was building ShieldNet, I also discovered something interesting about SecureCore's current products. I opened the Wired article that had published my white paper. Turns out, when you steal someone's work but don't understand it, you make mistakes. Dangerous mistakes. SecureCore's flagship security platform has critical vulnerabilities that could allow hackers to access supposedly secure networks. Tyler grabbed my phone and read the article, his face going pale. This says SecureCore's software is fundamentally flawed, that it's actually making companies less secure. That's right. Marcus implemented Dad's concepts incorrectly because he never understood the underlying principles. He just copied the surface elements and hoped for the best. As a result, companies that trusted SecureCore with their security are actually more vulnerable to attacks. Chloe looked at Marcus, tears in her eyes. Is this true? Have you been lying to us this whole time? Marcus finally broke down and admitted everything. How he'd found my father's notebooks, how he'd realized they contained revolutionary ideas, how he'd built his company around concepts he'd never fully understood. He'd been successful, but he'd always known he was just scratching the surface of what the technology could do. I tried to honor his work, Marcus said weakly. I built something successful from his ideas. You honored nothing, I shot back. You took credit for his genius while treating his son like an outsider. You got rich off his work while making me take out student loans. You gave your adopted children everything while making sure I knew I didn't really belong. And worse than that, I continued, your incompetent implementation of his work has put millions of people at risk. Dad's security protocols were designed to protect people. Your bastardized versions are making them vulnerable. Mom was crying now, finally understanding what had been happening all these years. Tyler and Chloe looked shell-shocked, realizing that their entire privileged lifestyle had been built on stolen ideas. What happens now? Tyler asked quietly. I looked around the table at my family, the people who'd made me feel like an outsider for over a decade. Now, SecureCore is finished. ShieldNet launches publicly next month, and we already have contracts with 60% of SecureCore's major clients. The FBI is investigating Marcus for intellectual property theft, and every security vulnerability I documented is being patched by companies switching to legitimate security providers. But what about us? Chloe asked, her voice small. What about our family? Marcus destroyed this family the day he chose to steal from my father, instead of honoring his memory. You're just now seeing the consequences of decisions that were made years ago. I stood up to leave, then turned back one more time. Tyler, Chloe, you're my siblings, and I love you. But you need to understand that everything you've had, the private schools, the cars, the college funds, was paid for with stolen work. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it has to be based on who you are as people, not what Marcus's theft bought you. The next few months were exactly as devastating as I'd predicted. SecureCore's stock price collapsed as clients switched to ShieldNet and other legitimate legitimate security providers. Marcus had to lay off most of his employees, sell his mansion, liquidate assets just to avoid complete bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. The tech media had a field day when the full story broke about ShieldNet being built on concepts from a deceased engineer whose stepson had been working for the competition. Marcus went from industry visionary to cautionary tale practically overnight. Tyler lost his VP position when Secure Core downsized to a skeleton crew. Chloe had to transfer to a state school when Marcus could no longer afford her Ivy League tuition. Mom had to go back to work for the first time in over a decade. But the most satisfying moment came when the Morrison Foundation for Cybersecurity Innovation was established using funds from my ShieldNet equity. The foundation provides scholarships for students studying cybersecurity and funds research into ethical security practices. My father's name is now permanently associated with the cybersecurity innovations Marcus tried to steal. Daniel Morrison is remembered as the visionary who developed the foundational concepts that revolutionized digital security. Marcus Riley is remembered as the fraud who almost destroyed that legacy through incompetence and greed. Meanwhile, CyberGuard's success with ShieldNet led to a major acquisition offer. Patricia offered me a choice: take a massive buyout for my shares or stay on as chief technology officer of the merged company. I chose the buyout. 12 years old. The entire table went silent. Mom looked confused. Tyler and Chloe were staring between Marcus and me, and Marcus looked like he was about to have a heart attack. That's impossible, Mom said. Marcus developed those ideas himself. He's been working in cybersecurity since he married you and got access to Dad's research, I interrupted. Every major breakthrough Secure Core has made, every innovation Marcus has taken credit for, it's all based on work my father did before he died. I opened the notebook and started reading directly from my father's notes, concepts that were identical to Secure Core's core technologies. Then I showed them printouts of Marcus's patents and papers, demonstrating how he'd taken my father's work and claimed it as his own. You stole from a dead man, I said, looking directly at Marcus. Built your entire reputation on his ideas, got rich and famous off his work while refusing to even adopt his son. Marcus tried to deny it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The dates, the concepts, the implementations, everything matched too perfectly to be coincidence. And now, I continued, I've spent the last 2 years using my father's complete vision to build something that's going to destroy your company. ShieldNet isn't just better than Secure Core. It's what Secure Core should have been if you'd actually understood the work you stole. That's when Marcus finally broke down and admitted everything. How he'd found my father's notebooks, how he'd realized they contained revolutionary ideas, how he'd built his company around concepts he'd never fully understood. He'd been successful, but he'd always known he was just scratching the surface of what the technology could do. I tried to honor his work, Marcus said weakly. I built something successful from his ideas. You honored nothing, I shot back. You took credit for his genius while treating his son like an outsider. You got rich off his work while making me take out student loans. You gave your adopted children everything while making sure I knew I didn't really belong. Mom was crying now, finally understanding what had been happening all these years. Tyler and Chloe looked shell-shocked, realizing that their entire privileged lifestyle had been built on stolen ideas. What happens now? Tyler asked quietly. I looked around the table at my family, the people who'd made me feel like an outsider for over a decade. Now? Secure Core is finished. ShieldNet launches publicly next month, and we already have contracts with 60% of Secure Core's major clients. Your company is about to lose everything, Marcus. And unlike you, I actually earned my success. The next few months were exactly as devastating as I'd predicted. Secure Core's stock price collapsed as clients switched to ShieldNet. Marcus had to lay off most of his employees, sell his mansion, liquidate assets just to keep the company from complete bankruptcy. The tech media had a field day when the story broke about ShieldNet being built on concepts from a deceased engineer whose stepson had been working for the competition. Marcus went from industry visionary to cautionary tale practically overnight. Tyler lost his VP position when Secure Core downsized. Chloe had to transfer to a state school when Marcus could no longer afford her Ivy League tuition. Mom had to go back to work for the first time in over a decade. Meanwhile, CyberGuard's success with ShieldNet led to a major acquisition offer. Patricia offered me a choice: take a massive buyout for my shares or stay on as chief technology officer of the merged company. I chose the buyout. At 26, I was financially set for life. Not because I'd stolen someone else's work, but because I'd honored my father's vision and built something genuinely innovative. The family tried to reconnect after the dust settled. Mom called crying, apologizing for not believing me about Marcus's theft. Tyler and Chloe reached out, saying they finally understood why I'd felt like an outsider all those years. Marcus himself showed up at my apartment one day, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past year. I'm sorry, he said. You were right about everything. I was jealous of your father's brilliance, intimidated by how much you reminded me of him. I thought if I could make his ideas successful, it would prove I was worthy of your mother, worthy of this family. By stealing from a dead man and excluding his son? Marcus nodded, shame written all over his face. I know it doesn't excuse anything, but I want you to know that I always regretted not adopting you. I was threatened by you, by your intelligence, by the way you looked at me like you could see right through me, because you could. I looked at this man who'd controlled controlled my family for so many years, who'd made me feel worthless while getting rich off my father's stolen work. He looked broken, defeated, nothing like the confident CEO who'd once dismissed me as not worth investing in. Marcus, I don't forgive you. I probably never will. But I'm not angry anymore either. You destroyed yourself by being too small-minded to see that you could have included me instead of trying to erase me. We could have built something incredible together using Dad's work. Instead, you chose theft and exclusion. Is there any way? Could we start over? Could I try to be the father I should have been? I shook my head. I don't need a father anymore. I needed one when I was 10 or 12 or 16. Now I'm a successful adult who built his own life despite you, not because of you. What about Tyler and Chloe? They're still family. They're my siblings and I love them. But they need to understand that the privileged life they grew up with was built on stolen work and family exclusion. If they want a relationship with me, it has to be based on who we are now, not the family dynamics you created. Marcus left that day looking like a man who finally understood the full consequences of his choices. Tyler and Chloe have both reached out since then. We're slowly building relationships based on honesty rather than the toxic family hierarchy Marcus had created. But the story doesn't end there. Because 6 months after Marcus's public downfall, something unexpected happened that tested everything I thought I knew about revenge and family. I was working late at my new consulting firm when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Dr. Sarah Chen, my father's former colleague who had helped me document the timeline of Marcus's theft. Daniel, she said, using my father's name like she always did when she was excited about something. I need to see you immediately. I found something that changes everything. She wouldn't tell me over the phone, insisted I come to her lab at the university. When I arrived, she had stacks of documents spread across her desk and a laptop open to what looked like legal paperwork. I've been going through your father's old files that the university finally released, she said, and I found something that Marcus never knew existed. She handed me a folder marked Morrison Chen Cybersecurity Partnership Agreement, confidential. Inside was a detailed business plan that my father had been working on with Dr. Chen before his death. They had been planning to start a cybersecurity company together using his protocols. There were incorporation papers, investment agreements, and most importantly, a will amendment that named me as the beneficiary of all intellectual property rights. Your father filed this with his lawyer 2 weeks before he died, Dr. Chen explained. It explicitly states that all his cybersecurity innovations belong to you, not to his estate. Marcus never had legal rights to any of this work. I stared at the documents, feeling my world shift again. What does this mean? It means Marcus didn't just steal from a dead man, he stole from you. Legally, you own the patents to every innovation Secure Core was built on. You could have sued for ownership of the entire company. The irony was staggering. While I'd been planning elaborate revenge through competition and exposure, I'd actually owned the rights to everything Marcus had built all along. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Secure Core is already finished. Dr. Chen smiled. Because there's more. Your father and I weren't just planning a cybersecurity company. We were developing something much bigger, a comprehensive digital security ecosystem that would revolutionize how data is protected across all industries. She opened her laptop and showed me files I'd never seen before. Advanced encryption algorithms, AI-powered threat detection systems, blockchain-based identity verification, concepts that were years ahead of anything currently on the market. Marcus only found the basic cybersecurity protocols in your father's notebooks, she continued. He never knew about the advanced work we were doing together. This could be worth billions, Daniel, and it's legally yours. I spent the next week reviewing everything with lawyers. The documentation was ironclad. My father had specifically ensured that his most advanced work would belong to me if anything happened to him. But as I studied the plans my father and Dr. Chen had developed, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money or even revenge anymore. This was about fulfilling my father's actual vision for cybersecurity, not the corrupted version Marcus had created. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of using the legal ownership to destroy what was left of Secure Core or to build another competing company, I decided to honor my father's original plan. I would start the company he dreamed of, but I would do it right. I reached out to Tyler first. Despite everything that had happened, he was still my brother, and he'd shown genuine remorse about how our family had treated me. I want to offer you a job, I told him during a tense coffee meeting. Not because of family obligation, but because you have a business degree, and I need someone I can trust to help me build something. Tyler looked suspicious. What kind of job? Co-founder of Morrison Chen Security Solutions, the company our father originally planned to start. I explained about the documents Dr. Chen had found, about the advanced technology that had never been implemented, about the opportunity to build something that would actually protect people instead of putting them at risk. But there are conditions, I continued. This isn't a handout. You'd start at entry level and earn your position based on performance. No special treatment because we're related. And most importantly, this company will operate with complete transparency and ethical standards. Tyler was quiet for a long time. Why are you offering me this? After everything Marcus did, everything our family put you through? Because you're not Marcus. And because I believe in giving people the chance to choose who they want to be, not punishing them forever for choices other people made. Tyler accepted the offer and started working for me the following month. It was awkward at first. He was used to privilege and quick advancement, while I insisted he learn every aspect of the business from the ground up. But slowly, something interesting happened. Working together, learning about our father's real vision, Tyler began to understand not just what Marcus had stolen, but what we could build to honor that legacy properly. Chloe took longer to come around. She was angry about having to transfer schools, bitter about losing the lifestyle she'd grown up with, but when she saw the work Tyler and I were doing together, when she learned about the grandfather she'd never really known, she started to change. She switched her major to computer science and asked if she could intern with our company during summer breaks. Like Tyler, she had to earn her place, but she threw herself into learning with the same intensity our father had shown. Mom was the hardest to forgive. She'd chosen Marcus's lies over the truth about her first husband's work. She'd allowed me to be excluded and diminished for years, but as she watched Tyler and Chloe rebuilding their relationships with me, she started to understand the full scope of what she'd lost. "I was so afraid after your father died," she told me during one of our stilted dinners. "Marcus seemed like security, like a guarantee that we'd be okay. I convinced myself that his success was more important than honoring your father's memory." "You convinced yourself that I didn't matter," I corrected. "That Tyler and Chloe's comfort was worth more than my inheritance or my father's legacy." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I was wrong. I was weak and selfish, and I failed you in every way that mattered." I didn't forgive her immediately. Trust isn't rebuilt with apologies, it's rebuilt with consistent actions over time, but I gave her the opportunity to try. Meanwhile, Morrison Chen Security Solutions was growing rapidly. Dr. Chen and I had assembled a team of ethical hackers, security researchers, and software engineers who were passionate about building protection systems that actually worked. Our first product was a revolutionary identity verification system that used blockchain technology to create unhackable digital identities. Our second was an AI-powered threat detection platform that could identify and neutralize cyber attacks in real time. But the most satisfying moment came when we launched our enterprise security platform, the true realization of my father's original vision. It made SecureCore's flawed implementations look like toys in comparison. Companies that had been burned by SecureCore's vulnerabilities were eager to switch to Morrison Chen Solutions. Within 2 years, we had captured 40% of the enterprise cybersecurity market. The tech industry took notice. Forbes featured me on their 30 under 30 list. Wired wrote a cover story about the true legacy of Daniel Morrison. TED invited me to give a talk about ethical innovation and honoring intellectual property. But the moment that meant the most was when Tyler gave his first presentation to potential clients. He talked about our company values, our commitment to transparency, our focus on actually protecting people rather than just selling expensive products. Watching him speak with genuine passion about cybersecurity ethics, seeing him build relationships with clients based on trust rather than manipulation, I realized he'd become the kind of businessman our father would have been proud of. Chloe graduated summa cum laude with her computer science degree and joined the company full-time as a junior developer. She has her father's analytical mind and her grandfather's innovative thinking. Watching her debug code with the same intense focus that used to remind Marcus of my father now fills me with pride instead of resentment. Marcus himself never recovered from the scandal. SecureCore finally closed its doors 3 years after my Wired article exposed the stolen technology. Marcus now works as a low-level consultant for other tech companies, helping them avoid the ethical pitfalls that destroyed his own business. He's tried to contact me a few times over the years, always with some variation of the same message. He's sorry, he's learned from his mistakes, he wants to make amends. I haven't responded to any of these attempts. Some betrayals are too fundamental to forgive, but I have taken one action regarding Marcus that even surprised me. When Morrison Chen Security Solutions went public last year, I donated 10% of my shares to a scholarship fund for students who've lost parents and are struggling to afford college. The fund is administered anonymously, but recipients receive a letter explaining that the scholarship exists because someone understands what it's like to lose a parent and then have their legacy stolen by people who should have protected it. I like to think my father would approve of using the money Marcus's theft generated to help other kids who are facing similar challenges. As I write this, I'm sitting in my office looking at a photo of my father working at his computer, completely absorbed in his coding. Sometimes clients ask about it, and I tell them about the brilliant engineer who developed the foundational concepts that modern cybersecurity is built on, about how his work was stolen after his death, but how his son eventually reclaimed his legacy and used it to build something honest. Last month, I got an invitation to speak at a cybersecurity conference. The topic, Ethics in Innovation, Building on the Past Without Stealing from It. The irony wasn't lost on me. During the Q&A, someone asked how to prevent intellectual property theft in family businesses. I thought about Marcus, about the years of feeling like an outsider, about watching him get rich and famous off my father's stolen work. The most important thing, I said, is to remember that behind every innovation is a person who deserves credit for their contribution. When you steal someone's work, you're not just taking their ideas, you're erasing their legacy and betraying the people who love them. The cost of that theft goes far beyond money or reputation. After the conference, a young young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Morrison, I think my stepfather might be using my deceased mother's research in his company. She was a brilliant scientist, and after she died, he suddenly started making breakthroughs in her field. My siblings don't remember her work, but I do. What should I do?" I looked at this young woman who reminded me so much of myself at her age, the forgotten child who remembered what others chose to forget. "Document everything," I told her. "Keep records, gather evidence, and never let anyone convince you that you're imagining things. Your mother's work deserves to be credited to her, and you deserve to be acknowledged as her child, not treated like an outsider in your own family." "But what if no one believes me?" I smiled and handed her my business card. "Then you find a way to prove it, and if you need help, you know where to find me." Walking away from that conference, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge on Marcus, but because I'd finally honored my father's memory in the right way. I'd used his work to build something honest and ethical, something he would have been proud of. Marcus had stolen my father's ideas and excluded me from the family, but in trying to erase me, he'd underestimated what I was capable of. He'd never understood that my father's greatest gift wasn't his revolutionary cybersecurity concepts. It was teaching his son to think independently, to question everything, and to never give up on what's right. I may have grown up feeling like an outsider, but that perspective gave me something Marcus never had: the ability to see clearly, to recognize theft and exclusion for what they were, and to build something better from a foundation of truth rather than lies. The kid who wasn't worth adopting became the man who destroyed the empire built on his father's stolen work. But more importantly, I became the man who rebuilt that legacy the right way, with integrity, inclusion, and respect for the brilliant engineer whose work started it all. My father would be proud of the man I became, the work I'm doing, and the way I reclaimed his legacy. And that's worth more than all the family acceptance I thought I wanted as a kid. I built my own family now: colleagues who respect my work, friends who value my integrity, and siblings who finally understand what real family means. It's not about sharing a name or living in the same house. It's about choosing to support each other based on love and respect, not manipulation and convenience. Marcus taught me what family shouldn't be. My father's memory taught me what it could be. And now I'm building the kind of life and legacy that honors both lessons.